welcome this morning. I'm excited to introduce Stefan, co-founder and CEO of Whole.io. Do you guys go by Whole.io or just Whole?
We go by Hall.
Hall?
Yeah,
All
but
right.
that's okay.
And so, I love the entrepreneurial journey because it's never the same, right? When you read about these success stories and these companies that have sold for all this money, and then when you peel back the layers and hear the story, it's always something new, always something different. There's always some chaos and typically a pivot or two. And so my continual intro question is, how did you get into the entrepreneurial world? Share a little bit about your background.
Thank you very much. So I'm European. I moved many years ago to the US. I would say it's about 13 years now. I came initially for a software company, which was a European one, and helped them basically build out their North American presence. So I grew for a while throughout the ranks of corporate life. I think I was a late bloomer about really taking that leap of faith into the entrepreneurial world. You could ask yourself, maybe that's the reason why I was raised by a professor and a teacher, and my grandfather was an entrepreneur, that I was more risk-averse, raised in my upbringing. But I realized when I was in my 30s, and at that point, I was running for a software company which just got acquired by SAP as one of the first 3 companies when they were building out their cloud practice. Their North American operations, and I did post-merger, and it's very interesting, but probably for a separate topic to talk about how due diligence works, but then post-merger integration is a whole different topic. But once I realized we landed safely with an SAP, I really decided if I'm not going to do something now, once you're going to have kids and your lifestyle and everything changes, I'm probably not going to take that step anymore. And so that is really when I started looking outside. I think at that point, felt that I could do it by myself. I also didn't feel that any of my ideas were at a point where I felt confident to pursuing them. So I was looking through the Techstars network, and that's where I actually got connected. And luckily enough today, by chance, Roman is in town too, with Roman and Stefan. So Stefan, who's not here, so we're a team of three founders, where Roman and Stefan started a company, got into Techstars. The initial idea was a customer engagement platform, and I will talk about this a little bit more. But I married up with them in Techstars. We kind of said, let's go through the program and see how it works. We had clear ideas about, I was the guy who was doing sales and finance. Roman was the product and product marketing guy, and Stefan was the tech guy. So, and then we had, at that point, they already had 2 developers. So we were, I would say, a decent team going through the Techstars experience. But that's how I initially got into this, and then I think from there on, do you want me to proceed to go into how it actually rolled?
So Techstars is one of the largest startup accelerator programs in the world, offices in a number of cities. And
we went through Boulder, yeah.
In Atlanta. Boulder's where it started.
Yep.
Spend a minute or two talking about the Techstars experience. What worked well? What were some things that were of note?
I think, there's so many accelerator programs, but in the world, the most 2 prestige ones is not just because we went through it, but it's Techstars and Y Combinator. So don't take my word here, but I think those are really the 2. And what separates them a little bit, it's the gang which is, so to speak, Boulder, and then the West Coast gang, which is, I would say, San Francisco. And David Cohen was the guy who originally founded it and has grown it since, where I think Y Combinator really focused on staying very close in San Francisco, and Techstars has really 2 programs. One, which is the accelerator program, where they build out various different cities. We have now one in Atlanta, which is run by an amazing guy, by Michael Cohen. And then they also have I would say, business branded arm, so where you have Nike run by Techstars. So where you have a big brand like Nike who actually wants to maybe invest and take young entrepreneurs to go and let them look into their fitness app and really give them ideas. And so what they do is they sponsor this. Techstars basically runs that accelerator program. And then Nike can use this, I would say, maybe for market research or for being able to have first tabs to invest in any of those early stage companies.
So you went through the Techstars program, had the big demo day at the end.
Yeah. So
what was the idea that was pitched at that demo day? And later on, we'll get into how that morphed over time.
So morphed, exactly. So I think at that point, I was still, so to speak, just part of it. So Roman really went through that experience. He did the demo day. We pitched our previous product, where in essence, what we did is we sold to media companies, and we provided a toolbox of APIs for gamification and identity. So think about it that you want to build a campaign and on the web, and you wanted to actually add some gamification aspects to it, like you want to do a quiz, you want to do a sweepstake. And the reason why this is important is that we believe that brands, instead of where before they would just give that budget to a given agency, that agency would build a one-off campaign, would collect, so to speak, a lot of information about consumers, and then that would end up in a CSV file and never really would be consolidated, so there would not be an overall learning aspect for that brand. So typically brands get 110 pages of a report back from an agency, and it's very poor. At least that's what Roman experienced, because he had the agency experience beforehand, to actually the learning aspect to it. So our plan was to be able to make it so that brands have the full experience over content, experience and content, and we provide them the tools so that they can actually then drive that data back into a one database where they could make better decisions of it.
And so it didn't work. Or you found a better idea. What happened next from a product and idea point of view?
So as I said, this is going to be very authentic, and if you would just not mind or wouldn't mind raising your hands quick, who is currently in the stage of exploring to potentially want to go into business by himself or with someone else, or is already a first-time entrepreneur, so I just get an idea. So
who's an entrepreneur right now?
Right now, or who thinks about it. Okay, great. So this is going to be great for you guys, because you will see that there's a lot of encouragement that it's not always a straight path. There is, as long as you keep, so to speak, the overall goal and you're going to be relentless about it and you stay focused, I think you will get there. But so from our end, we really had the rude awakening, and it's right after demo day. So through the Techstars experience, you can walk into most of the really well-known early-stage VCs all over the country. So you get a meeting, and I attended some of them with Roman, and I think we did everything we could. I don't think we did anything wrong, but we always heard politely that either they had certain kind of challenges. So what we said is we had obviously the initial funding from Techstars. We took with Techstars, you get, so to speak, some cash, which helps you to go through the program, and then you have the possibility to take a convertible note, which they offer to every participant. So we took that. So we had some cash in the bank. And so we decided, I personally decided, I think for me and my family, is that while the team was moving back to France, I was like, wow, I mean, there's no way that I'm going to be staying here, and I was obviously in Atlanta before, that I'm going to be staying in Atlanta and we're going to be able to build this remote. So I approached my wife and asked her if she would be willing to move to Paris for a while. Also, maybe a good note, really, wherever you are in your life stage and you think about building a business, if you're in your 20s, you probably need way less in what I call a piggy bank than what you need when you're in your 30s. So make sure that, one, your partner, if you have one, is committed to it, and make sure that you're not just only get a commitment for a year, also not 2 years, probably more 5 years. And you also explain to them that what they're going through to is that you mentally probably are not anymore married to them. You're more so married to the idea of what you're pursuing and the team you're with. And then, all of the other commitments should go along with this. But I think it's responsible to say that you should have some kind of savings set aside, because you will take, at least if you're not in your 20s, a significant pay cut. Sometimes you might actually not going to pay yourself in the beginning at all. And I tell you that, if you're already building a company and you're betting your odds against, so to speak, very more established companies, or that the market might not be at the right place, you really want to make sure that you don't get more pressure on your private side, at home. And so I think that's really something which you should really consider. But yeah, I think...
So you went out and you pitched the VCs on idea 1.0,
yeah,
and the VCs politely said that they hated the idea?
No, that would be maybe a good thing, right? But you never get really that very... often what we got is, yeah, let us pitch this to our portfolio and get back to you. Or, in the end of it, think about if you want to start thinking about raising capital, you have to put yourself also in the shoes of a VC. They're really looking for any type of red flag to not invest into your company, and that's the right thing to do. And it really goes, I think, in general about team, the product, is the market there, and then I think the most important one is timing. I cannot tell it more than, I think with our first approach why we failed is because in general is that what we had seen is we won actually clients, so we didn't really after Texas right away after we didn't get funding. We're entrepreneurs. If you get a no, that doesn't mean that we have explored everything. So we started honing into various areas of the market size and basically see where we could land. So it would be super easy if you right away, and maybe that would be also a bad thing if you right away say, well, no, we didn't make it there, let's just pivot. And then you could lose yourself because it's not always guaranteed that you right away find the space. So you really need to be very thorough into understanding, so to speak, the unit of value of what defines you as a company. And then once you have that, you really have to test it in various areas. So from our end, with that first company, it's not that we didn't land deals. We had, as a small company of 5, we won the second largest media company in India who was building a competitor to actually to Netflix, and we're providing gamification and identity features to them. So that was a big deal for us. We won, I'm pretty sure whoever drinks wine knows La Crema. So we did a virtual venture where they had an experience where they said we take an entire harvest and let, so to speak, the audience decide of what decision steps we take. And they gamified it so that they learned more about their basically buyer audiences, but which they couldn't really connect with before. But now they learned more about their interests, so they could take that and really would make decisions driving forward to what they would do with creating wine. And so
you signed up some paying customers.
We did, yes. And that was maybe also what was painful, because if we wouldn't have been able to sign anybody, we would have pivoted way earlier. Mm-hmm. But we were able to, and so that's exactly, I think, where it becomes hard, is that it's that moment where you're like, oh, we just need to push a little bit harder, and and then I think this where you're going to start having the hard conversations about, is this a lifestyle business? Because, I consider lifestyle business if you eventually not really consider, it doesn't need to be immediate the hockey stick, but you need to have, and that's what I will explain where Hall is today, where you have very clear indicators as to see why now there is really something there. Back then, I don't think we had this, and I think we then came together as a team, and we really thought about what we're going to do. And then also is, are you going to completely pivot to something new, and you're going to do something completely different? Are you going to just like slightly change? And so from our end, we had I would say, we had 2 ideas, or I would say, early stage ideas which we wanted to consider. One was a very minor pivot, but that's what we approached first. What I can tell is that while pivoting and while learning, it has helped us over time to actually, believe it or not, maybe it was luck to us, but we built some aspects of the platform or what we learned, what actually was not completely, which we had to deprecate with what Hall is today. But just so you know, then we pivoted the first, I would call it micro pivot, to from what I mentioned before, user engagement platform, now we believe that, hey, okay, we're going to make it even easier for agencies and for brands to actually inject, so to speak, gamification features into their website. So we believed, okay, if we just make this simple enough and we're opening up now the products to a wide range of people, not only just agencies and bigger brands. There would be developers which work for brands. There would be, so to speak, agencies, and they could just tap into this and could use that. So they still had the flexibility of customizing it, but also if they needed something quick, they could inject, so to speak, a comments feature, or they could inject, so to speak, any kind of aspect what you see. And so when I'm talking about injecting is, we see a website as property, so you have probably, real estate, you have a lot of times when you see ads, but then there's a lot of other areas. What made MailChimp so successful is that they had a little sign-up button to subscribe to a newsletter. And so see just Hall that we provided a lot of those little components which you could just decide once you actually connected your website to it where you wanted to inject that. And then the whole spiel started again. So we built that, we were motivated.
So it didn't work.
Didn't work again.
Again.
Yeah, again. And that's where I think at that point, also our families are like, maybe you guys should just go back to corporate and just make a really solid living and just call it a day. But I mean, kudos to Roman, Stefan, and myself that we weren't finished with it. So we just, and I feel, and that's where I come into play. I didn't think that the journey before was really Roman and Stefan's, and I tagged along and I really tried what I also did in corporate too. I do believe that entrepreneurs, there's also people who are in businesses, I think Ed encapsulates this as well, is that you take passion and proud about what you do in a given company, so you don't have to be the founder, but it really separates you from the rest. It's like if you take passion and ownership, that's exactly, I think, what is the first step to if you want to grow your own company. But yeah, so coming back, so my background was in business integration, so I came from, just to give you an idea, so what we help companies, particularly large companies, is to help with business transactions outside of the four wall of their organization. So sharing orders to cash, procure to pay processes, logistic processes. So there was always an integration problem, and there was a mapping problem, and then it basically would go to a system. It could be mostly an ERP system or something else where you would have that data. What we realized is that by really, I think, by talking more to people is that while you had in the early 2000s a problem again where you actually you had those islands of integrations and you tried to build those interfaces which were super costly to build, to maintain. Well, with the whole cloud movement, what happened is IT couldn't really anymore prevent from the business departments like marketing, sales, CS, to really make their choices. They could easily, just now finally, I didn't have to listen to IT anymore. They could just go and say like, well, if you cannot build it to me, if you cannot serve me in a timely manner, I'm just gonna subscribe to a cloud service. So what would happen is they would fulfill their needs, but they would create buckets where data would reside in. And so it became, again, an integration problem. And I think that's really where we started to hone into this. And we were lucky, actually, in Paris to meet a guy by the name of Guillaume Caban. I'm not sure if you know him, but he now runs Thrift Growth. So he was back then still at Mention, and he really digged the idea. And while we're at that point 3 guys, I basically kept the lights on by making sure, and actually one thing to mention, our claim of fame with the previous product we had again success, we actually created over 1,000 customers in Shopify with our social login product. So we actually were able to still sell. We still have large accounts like Movement Watches, they grew into 60 million of revenue. But so we had a steady revenue stream again from the second one. But again, I think
But
fast
you saw the
forward,
writing on the wall that it wasn't.
we saw the writing on the wall. But so again, the way how we kept us alive was that we took a little node at that point just to help us with some aspects. But let's come back to that later. But if we would have had success to actually raise money in the first attempt going out of Techstars, I don't think we would have been fundable at the point when we actually reached what we're doing today. Because we would have had so much weight on our cap table, and I think already it would have been really hard. But
yeah,
so
those investors would have signed up for that previous
exactly.
path.
Yeah, so we would have to make very hard choices. So anyway, so we were really clean on the cap table. We had at that point, I think maybe 300,000 raised, so not more than that. But so this time we're like, okay, here's what we do. We take the approach serious. So we closed out. We really, Roman, Stefan, we're focusing on, we had about 4 customers in beta, which were willing to pay for it. We made sure, because I think there's also an aspect, and you will hear this from a lot of entrepreneurs, happy customer ears is something which you can very, very quickly fall into. There's a lot of people who will always tell you what they need, but it becomes a different story when you tell them that there's a price point for it. And if you see if they're actually willing to pay for something, and if you're actually good at it, and they're paying for something which you have not even built, but you're explaining to them something which is so much of a need to them that they're willing to sign up for it, take the risk, and pay for it up front, I think that's already a good indication. So we had that with 4 customers. Roman and Stefan was actually working to build that, while I actually, as I said, kept the business on the sales side, kept revenue going in that aspect. And so that was 2016. So throughout 2016, I think we obviously took shortcuts. You have to see, as with 3 guys, you cannot completely unwire your product. And so we had to, I would say we had to build a new part, but we still had, so to speak, some technical debt on all of the gamification aspect. We still had maybe some clients which were also using it, where we had to actually tell them nicely that we're actually going somewhere completely different, so you have to find something new. And another interesting aspect is today is, I'm pretty sure you followed that Gigya got acquired last year by SAP.
Doing the social sign-on.
Yeah, exactly. Doing the social sign-on, but what probably a lot of people don't know is we saw when we actually pivoted, we looked at them very serious, and we saw they raised up to a Series F. They had about 100 million they raised, I think, at that point, and they got acquired for under 300 million. So I know you know both sides of the end. I'm pretty sure if you would wear your investor hat, you wouldn't be too happy about that. So I think we did the right thing, at least I believe, and I'm committed to what we're doing today. But so within 2016, we were really just building out the beta, and we also joined yet again throughout while we were in France another it's an accelerated program. No, it's like a help network. 50 partners they called in France. And what it is, it's 50 very successful entrepreneurs. They take 2 companies per year into their program, and we actually made it in there. So we were super excited. And I do believe that they really helped us fuel. And so this is now, I think, where the good times start rolling around with Hall, is we're like, hey, we're not confident because we got so beaten up the first time when we tried to raise capital, that I think we didn't really had a lot of confidence that we were already at a stage with those 4 beta customers that we could raise capital. But with 50 partners, they basically just beat the drum for us, and all of a sudden we had a convertible note which started growing. And then Roman called me up, just like, oh man, there's like a lot of the European VCs are getting really excited about this. So all of a sudden, I think from that note, it just became bigger and bigger, and I was like, and I always heard this from, I think, one of my mentors, Scott Lewin, who brought me to the US, I think you met him. I felt like, man, kicking the can down the road with so much debt and it's not converted, I mean, I wasn't comfortable anymore. So another very interesting point, and I think Roman is okay with me sharing this, but so obviously we took already the note, but then was a discussion about, are we taking more? And I was saying, well, let's take more, but they also wanted to do a note, and I was like, well, if they only want to do a note, they're not really committed. They need to do a price round. So I think that's the commitment where we were hoping to get. So I was pushing really hard for the price round. He was telling me, you're too greedy, you're pushing this too hard. I was like, I'm just not comfortable with not having that debt converted. I want a clear cut now. I also want to be taken serious here, and we achieved that. So luckily enough, we were able to, and I think also for our angel investors, which something you should know is like when you raise a convertible note, people want to make some, I mean, they come in earlier, they want to make some of it before you do the price round. They were pretty flexible for us that we did back to back. So We had the note, and then we did the price round. And so
how much did you end up raising?
we raised, we ended up having total raised 2.6. So if you take the 300 off, then we do 2.3. So
3 million.
Yeah. So at that point, we were obviously
on 5 beta customers, more or less.
Well, 5 plus obviously we had some early adopters, and we had our existing, so to speak, revenue. So there was, but yeah. So.
But it was still a new direction and a limited number of customers.
New direction, limited number of customers. But we had, yeah. I mean, I think what you could see is, and what helped us out is also, as I said, once it starts around us, we had a lot of interest from a ton of inbound interest. We could have kept going. And actually, there were people telling me, why don't you just keep going? You're already on a roll. Just why stop at 2 point something? You should just take a little bit more. You can always need it. So anyway, we decided we were always very, I would say, efficient in the way of how we deployed, that we, at that point, stopped and go back again to focus on building the business.
And so this new direction was integration software,
yeah,
primarily focused on sales, marketing, and customer success, so that these different systems could automatically integrate their data.
Yeah, for everyone here in the audience who maybe has not heard the term customer data management platforms, what we do is, I'm pretty sure you're well aware about what a water treatment plant does, and that's exactly what we do for businesses and their data. So our value is not about that we provide yet hundreds of integrations, that's what we eventually want to do, but we allow you from a wide variety to actually ingest data that could be from third-party services like Salesforce, HubSpot, Pardot. That could be from your website. That could be also from SQL. That could be from any kind of webhooks. So we take the data, and I think where the value of Hall is not only by ingesting the data at scale, is that then we build identity resolution on top of this. And if you haven't heard the term, what becomes for businesses a challenge is that there's no shortage of data, but the problem is that often what happens is, or in the past, is that people would push all of their customer data into a customer data warehouse system like Redshift or whatever, and then they would put their data engineers and data scientists at it with Looker or other tools to derive decisions of that, which they would feed up to the executive teams. The executive teams would take that data and we would feed it back down into the respective departments. So very much of a disconnected loop, one-way street. From a Hall perspective, what we believe in and what our customers demand from us is that, one, they obviously want to inject a lot of data. Two, then they want to build that identity graph, which allows us, we're focusing on B2B, so we're not only building that for a unified user profile, so let's say you have various data coming in from those sources, we build you the single truths of what are all the attributes, what are the event-based information, what has that user done. If you have worked with a marketing automation tool, then you know within marketing automation, you can take data from your website, you can take data from form fills, and so with Hall, once you actually then have the data and you build segmentation, you can do it from all of those aspects, but you can also take it from every other integration point, from Intercom, like where you get your chat data from, or you can take it from a SQL database, or now, once you have the data, or before that already, you can enrich it. So we could push that data out to a third-party enrichment service,
like Clearbit.
Like Clearbit, for example, which we have a partnership with, and DataNice, for example. So Clearbit for firmographics or demographic data. And why this is so important is these days the companies which, and that maybe goes to, so where we started out, we get the money in the bank. So now we were all like, let's do this. And I think I was the guy who beat the drum the most and the hardest. So I was like, we're gonna go. And I think what was really challenging for us in Paris, you have to understand, we have an office in Paris where my two co-founders are, where our product and tech is. We have remote, Ed, I'm not gonna call London, Ed is in Paris, but we have remote, a development presence in Krakow, Poland, and where we build our connectors, and then we have, so to speak, our go-to-market team within Atlanta. And so I think when we were starting to build out, we had problems in Paris to to basically find technical talent. We had Datadog, if that's a name, they just opened up and they had 50 profiles out there exactly looking for the same talent we were looking at. And it was just really, really tough, particularly if once you found someone, they have to give 3 months. I mean, it's a nightmare sometimes what we have to deal with to really think about when do you scale, when do you hire, and how early on you start that process to really, I would say, to look into bringing on talent and sourcing for that, because you need to know way earlier than you do in the U.S.
So you're saying that the French labor laws are a little different than the U.S.
They are.
Labor laws?
Yeah, they are. But then on the other hand, while the labor laws are different, there's also having a state which you can get, I would say, a very good credit note for almost zero interest up to 7 years. So there's a lot of other aspects which help you and which you don't have probably available here in the US. But so, yeah, those were challenges for us where I think the technical team, particularly now as we're adding more skills, so you have to understand that throughout that first half year, we were building up, we were bringing in talent. So we personally, the founders, started taking our eyes off the day-to-day work, doing that, but then also doing a lot of, I would say, hiring. And on top of it, we were starting to sign new customers. We, as a board, decided back then, and I think today from the lessons learned from the first year, is that we decided that we knew that on the enterprise side, there was a lot of demand for this. If you look at Delta.com, they just last year in their Q4 investor report were just openly explaining that they had significant challenges connecting all of their data sources and building a better customer experience. The only way to do that is if you really do that hard work on the bottom end. And so we were really betting on saying that we want to start out bottom up. We wanted to build something really sleek, making sure that it's easy but powerful, but really take that untapped market. Unfortunately, after a half year into this, we know that we helped a lot of, and back then we sold for 250 MRR.
$250 a month.
$250 a month, and we didn't really force any annual payment up front. So we basically saw that we helped customers get on. The persona was growth marketers at that point. Marketers weren't technical enough, wouldn't really be able to drive this product. And throughout half of the year, we saw that it wasn't really a perfect fit. We were too low of the market because we helped them really clean up their data. But then once it came to that they would have to pay more, they often then decided to either stall or they looked for a cheaper workflow solution once we laid that layer. And so I think—
So you were signing up customers at a price point that turned out to be the wrong audience to go after.
Yeah, and so Cherry Chan wrote something great about this, so if you want to look it up, it's called Unit of Value. And he talks about where you want to be. Every VC will tell you that, how are you going to get to 100 million? And he calls it the dead zone. And so I was a big believer about this as well, is that if you're either around 100 or you're above 1,000, means like you're around 12,000 and up. Everything between that area, it makes it super hard, because if you're at a smaller unit, you completely build everything on inbound. And if
like a MailChimp.
Like a MailChimp. So where inbound, when I refer to this, is you don't really have a sales presence. As people who follow up, it's very much automated. You have your growth streams, which are constantly looking at the acquisition funnel. They're building experiments, and they're just honing in, and trying to just grow that. If you're in that space in between, your unit of economics is very tough, because early on you can say, well, we're just in a seed round, we're going to get there, right? But we learned really hard that it attracted the wrong buyers. We had to do work so hard for this to help them out, and we realized, and also our VCs convinced us to really say, you got to get this. They encouraged us to look deeper into this area. And so throughout half of the year, we said, okay, there's a new persona of data engineers. And when you look at the MarTech, so to speak, vertical of how just the sheer size of vendor grew, over the last years to now. I think we're at 6,000 vendors. It's very tough. There is not going to be a roll-up like you had in the early 2000s where you had a couple of companies would say, hey, part of the thorn in my eye, I'm just going to roll them up into me because they're going to become a potential threat. With 6,000 and a lot of them doing really well, I mean, look where Drift is today and where they were just a couple of years ago, it becomes hard for the big dogs to basically buy them up. And so there is always going to be now that integration challenge. And this is, I think, what we bet on. And with the persona of data engineers, which we saw grew exponentially as well with that whole MarTech thing, you can see that there is a correlation to that. So from our end, we found a new persona which was more technical. They typically work for marketing organizations. They're either for marketing ops, sales ops, or revenue ops, those headcounts. And we also knew that we had to go into, we said about 5 million, I think it's more now 10 million, and below 100 million. So still keeping that sales cycle, I would say, fairly short, not going through a lot of the, I would say, procurement processes, but being able to get, as in Boiler Room, is to get a yes or no very quickly. You didn't really want those lengthy processes. And so today we have customers like, they fit that profile. We have Drift, we have Front App, just to name a few. We have HashiCorp. So they're all around 60 plus million in funding. They're way off to, they have found product market fit, and they have significant teams who are actually working on that challenge to really optimize in various areas, so to speak, the overall experience for the customer. And on the bottom, Hall is basically funneling all of this through. And so that makes us very proud, but on the other hand, it also created some new challenges on the technical side, because now we really felt that technical weight of what we didn't solve when we pivoted and cleaned up, that it became more and more of a problem. So if you run, I'm not going to name any customers, but if you run about 50 million incoming requests as just a number, just for a given customer, and you boil this up over X amount of customers, you start to have really heavy volume on that platform. So now you go, I always explain it with a bus 60 miles down the road, and you're like, oh man, that tire really, we need to fix it, but you can't stop. So it becomes a bit of a challenge, and I think that's where we have to take a little bit of a step back. And that's, again, it's very hard, because when you take a step back, it means that you make a conscious decision by making that step back that you let people go. And it's very hard, because it's not when you're like previous organization, I'm not going to say that I enjoyed this ever, but if you have hundreds of people, it's a different story. That when you know those guys, they came, they signed up for you, their passion, they worked hard, and now you need to tell them that, I'm sorry, we need to clean up that technical debt, we cannot yet hit more scale, we need to first sort this out, and I couldn't really get a clear idea how long this would take. So it's very hard. For me, I was really pushing hard on this, because you know it, when you hire people, when you train them, when you make them operational, there's an investment, time and cost. And if someone cannot tell you that someone would tell you this takes more than 3 months or 6 months, it's a different story. If it's just going to take 90 days, you would never let those go over that time, because remember, eventually you come to that point again where you want to scale, and yet now the challenge is it's not only finding talent, people are talking, the whole thing is very small, the community. You also need to find, when we hired that first group, we had, for example, a problem that we hired someone which was the right guy, but for not the size of our company. So he was too senior, and I was just bullish on us, but I had to realize it, and it clashed a little bit with the rest of the team. But if you have a unit, in the beginning you really have units, you go-to-market unit, and they really need to stand back to back, and they need to really, every loss they need to talk and think about, and every win they need to celebrate together. And that's why we also made sure that while we were, I would say to some extent, remote, we made sure that we could cluster around product and tech, and we could cluster around go-to-market. But so we had to take a step back, and that's, so to speak, the dark sides again, because it was going well, and now you had a dip again. You're like, are you serious? It's now just going to have to take the foot off the pedal again. But so that's where we're currently at. We're actually where our customers are having more and more demands. Things which do go really well is that in average we grew our customers by 800% just by upselling them. And that's also maybe something if you look into is from a commercial model perspective, you really want to build a pricing model which is not only tied to the success of your customers' growth. It means, simple example, a customer has 100 customers, you have a tier, he fits into the 100 customers. Once he reaches 200 customers, you like cha-ching, now we can upsell them. That's great, I think, for your customer, not great for you as the company, because what you do is you probably believe that you're providing value on top of that. So I always believe in two-dimensional pricing models. One, you need to anchor them somewhere of where they fit in. That's, so to speak, it's either by number of customers, it's volume for us, it's what we define as the unit is incoming requests per month. And then we recently changed that to connectors because there's a story to be told about as well. But what we did is also, we have the number of connectors, and that's the value we bring. So even if you actually have, let's say, first bracket 5 million events per month, so you're a moderate business, that means you might have integration needs, and for those needs where we bring value to you, we can charge for this. So you fall in the first bracket, but we still upsell you while you're actually going to buy more of those integrations from Hall. So that's what we lived with last year. The learning this year was that now we got to a point, because that was not perfectly automated, so we ran audit reports, and we saw that, I mean, every 60 days, I kindly then reached out and said, hey, you're in the tier brackets of 30 million, you're actually now at 50 million, we got to talk about this. So that's not a good experience. I personally believe, we believe, and that's why we made the changes, because one, we're forcing you to make a decision. The response was always, well, this was just a one-time spike, or you could find people who are, I would do probably the same thing. I would explain to why that was just an anomaly. Well, the report shows that over the last 3 months you had an anomaly, and this continues to grow steadily by 5 to 10%. But anyway, so we realized instead of making it a bad experience commercially, because it's always a topic where I think I don't have a problem talking about, but I also get that it needs to be valued to the customer. And so what we did is we said, why are we forcing this? We're going to go and take our commercial model now and say, listen, we're going to say you just consume integrations. You tell us whatever integration you have, and that comes with a set number of pre-defined volume packaged tier. If you're going to go over that tier, we're going to charge overage charges. So now it's up to the customer. We don't have to have that conversation. They're picking their tier. If they want to pick a bigger tier because they have more volume, then they make the decision on it. What it helps us is that we can now bring value again, because we have built everything on the back end so that we're billing, so to speak, the tier up front. We take at the end of the monthly subscription the delta. Are you over that? Then we're going to apply that. So now if you constantly are paying, and you could be better off in the next bigger tier, the value we bring to you as a customer is, again, we now have a conversation by helping you save money. It's a way better experience than we're telling you that you need to pay more money. So those are a lot of lessons that we learned. So while we're actually, I think, catching up on the product side to really set us up for the next growth spurt, and it's not that we're not signing new customers, but that we're very conscious about that, is that we're looking into how to lay out the go-to-market plans where what we've learned from the last year, so that we, from there on, then again, can scale.
That's awesome. Let's talk about core values. So your first core value on the website is families first. Tell us about the process of coming up with your values and some of your thoughts around it.
I think we decided that we really, we wanted to make this not just only that the 3 founders go to an offsite meeting and we're like coming up with values. We really believe that last year when we made those first hires, which we're all very passionate about it, building culture, that we made this a conscious effort to have everybody being involved in it. I think the family first one, that is really something which goes back to the 3 founders, which we all hold very highly. we all, back then I didn't have a kid, now I have a kid. Roman and Stefan both have 2 kids. We're all married. I think that one of the decisions we're making in doing this, because we believe that while you work hard, there's also responsibility as to, from an employing standpoint, to really appreciate the people who are with. And I think the value also struck home with me is that we recently had, last year, an incident where I was really tested. So, we had the core value of family first. Now, all of a sudden, I had an employee which shared with me that he had a major incident in his family, and he needed some time off. He didn't really ask for the time off, but he shared it with me, and it struck home to me that I put myself into the situation, if that would happen to me. And now is the question of what you do. Are you either going to play this, you hardball it, and you're like, yeah, take a couple of days off and I need you back, or you're going to be, no, the team is going to come closer together. We're going to be absorbing this. If it's a month or 2, you're going to spend that time, and then you're going to come back. But I'll tell you that I am a big believer that integrity is owned in drops, and it's basically given away in buckets when you let people fall. So that goes both ways, right? So I believe that while we were making this conscious decision as Roman, Stefan, me, that we believed that, sure, absolutely, that was not just that I even had to sell them on it. They were right away. But it's where you test your core values. It's not just only that you take a bunch of core values, they look sexy, they help you by acquiring new talent, but then when you really are tested, you cannot live up to them. And I think that's where really your core values either fall or stand.
So last question before we open it up to the audience. What's one piece of advice that you would offer up to a first-time entrepreneur? And you've been at it for what, 5 years now?
5 years, yeah.
So 5 years in, what's the first thing that comes to your mind for entrepreneurial advice?
I feel that my past in corporate life was, I was falling up the ladder, and I don't think it was easy. I was working very hard. But as an entrepreneur, you're daily tested. You're, first and foremost, what will happen is, you will see with your friends is, they think you built the next Facebook, and they're super excited for you. That's the first 3 months. I call it the honeymoon phase. Then all of a sudden, they don't ask you anymore because you're like, I'm telling you the same story again because I'm here transparent. This is where we're at. Oh, hey, cool. So eventually they become quiet, and maybe hear rumors they're like, well, Stefan, I'm sure I'm a little bit concerned about it. And then you hear some of that friend circle, like really then becomes the concern phase. And then becomes the, so to speak, let's just not touch that subject anymore phase. And I think that's the reason where before, as a president of Hall, of CrossKit, you have to make serious decisions. You're obviously, to some extent, in any executive version, you're alone. But as an entrepreneur, that's also, if you decide you want to be a single founder, remember, there's hard times ahead. I think 2 is better than 3. And there's not that from what I've heard from other experience, it works out for us. But I think with 3, it becomes also the problem that you cannot make very quick decisions. You always need a sales and a product guy or a tech guy. But my single advice is that you will be tested, and you will get to know yourself much better in that period of time. And I promise you it will be, in average, always 3 to 5 years of where you are going to be in a bubble. Everything around you, they just need to be put on hold. My wife said it. She just still says it. She's like, well, this is your baby. She's basically supporting this because she sees that there is an end goal, and obviously that always helps when you see that things are moving. That probably wouldn't help when we would be still at the first one where we would build a lifestyle business. But yeah, I think don't be afraid, but your life will completely change. I do believe that Roman always said we're like cockroaches. I wouldn't probably say it this way, but you have to be relentless. You cannot give up. There's always a bigger competitor who has more money, who's either more successful in raising in it. The advantage what you have often is you might not beat the team by size, but maybe you just have 24 months, 12 months, 8 months, if you're actually early into this, more experience about learning all the pitfalls where you know those 30, 100 guys are all going to fall in. Because that's not something which you're going to actually find on a whiteboard. It's something where you really need to see that problem, discover it, and that's kind of like where you still have, I would say, an up on it. That doesn't mean that you should rest on it, but that's my side.
Awesome. We got a couple minutes for audience questions. Who wants to go first?
With you being so focused on Europe, what's the implication of GDPR on the data business?
Great question. I think it has been a significant driver for, and again, I think we're betting on, and that's maybe also a good question. So GDPR is a compliance topic, which all of a sudden, thanks to the Europeans, we're throwing on everybody who has customers in Europe. So no matter what size of business you are, I mean, you can see now that there's already popping up the first things where they act on it. So this can be a severe problem for you if you're going to be receiving that type of fine. That could also potentially take you out of business. So people are taking this very serious. For us, it's a good thing because in the end of it, we believe, and that's coming back one more time to what you need to sell your investors on, we believe by not going into the enterprise market and competing with all of the other ones, by really honing in on the mid-market, is that we believe by 2020, there is so much demand that we need to be the household data brand in that segment. So besides of building a product, you need to build a brand and you need to be able to actually, when that wave is ready, what has helped us a lot is that we didn't really know that this would come, but now all of a sudden, companies actually have to already tackle that problem before, and often they either try to do it in-house and then they come back and have a conversation about it. But yeah, it has been, so to speak, a very fueling for us aspect to what has helped our business.
So you can imagine somebody opts out in one system through GDPR, but then you have 5 other systems with that same person's data.
Yeah.
And if you're not using whole, those systems aren't talking to each other, and so now
Yeah.
you can be in default.
I mean, it goes to the point that you have probably, if you're a company of a certain size, not just one email system where you touch an actual customer. So if someone unsubscribed from system A, I mean, it's a simple thing. He should be also removed from system B because he might be present in there. But it's a very difficult task when it's actually in real life. So those are things what we help. I mean, those are probably the easiest things, but just to give you an idea.
All right, question in the back.
Yeah, you talked about team, product, market, and timing being the important factors to a company's success, and you said timing probably being most important. How do you make sure your timing is right?
Great question. I think our timing was off with the first one, but this time we looked again. So now after, I think you have now great material at hand. If you look into Grunge-Base, you can take a look at what we did is we looked at more of the enterprise-focused guys which are in our segment. They don't compete with us because we don't sell into enterprise. But where did their journey start? So
Like a MuleSoft?
Like a Lytics, for example, more so I think. Because I think with Lytics, you can show they started out in the mid-market. They had public pricing on their website. They were too early. And so what they were forced with is that they had to eventually raise a constitutional round, I think private equity round, and they were forced to go up market. So from our end, I think and that was 3-4 years ago. So that's when you see that's too early to the market. They already wanted to, they had probably a similar idea of what we want to do is like, why to fight actually there in the enterprise space? And then also, we're a small team. We're currently now, we're building because our customers are demanding more of those enterprise-grade feature set and that reliability around auditing and other aspects. I mean, we're dealing with your I would say, golden liquid of your company data set. So you want to make sure that this is really in good hands. But I think we have seen that what last year was also another aspect, which is a good one to see, is when you're too early or not. Last year we had to do a lot of, we had to educate, evangelize around this in our segment. this year, not that we're doing, actually remember, we scaled back on the go-to-market side. We're having more inbound leads now without not really doing as much as what we did last year. That shows also that in that current segment where we're trying to hone in, people are now becoming more aware this is being a problem, and they're looking out for who are the vendors who are actually addressing this problem. So those are, what I think, you can never really bet on it. You always take a certain risk, but those are good indicators. Look at Crunchbase, at some other aspects. Where do those people start? What's their journey? And then probably also just look at your own data about if you're doing the right thing, you articulate your message well, you build. What we did is you obviously have to build connections with, in our end, we intercom, HubSpot just focus us. We're working now with Salesforce together. We're partnering with Clearbit. So there's a lot of areas where you can drive, so to speak, and you can put out the noise. But that's also what I think which gives us an idea of why we're not immediately, if someone asks us or an advisor comes and says, you should go to the enterprise, we're like, hey, let's talk about this, because we believe there's currently not really anybody who has cemented themselves. Segment persona is maybe the closest, who is someone similar, but also them, they're probably going more up market. But that doesn't mean that we should rest. This is a hot topic, and there's more competitors popping up in the segment as well.
Awesome. Time for one last question. Right here.
Hi, Thomas Ward.
Hi, Thomas.
You mentioned that you faced many obstacles and that you had to pivot. What was your mindset when it came to not just facing, but overcoming these obstacles and these points in your entrepreneur journey?
I think this is, again, if you're a single founder, you know, it's everyone teaches you. It's a Techstars 1-on-1, fail fast, right? Because what it allows you to do is the same thing in sales. The 1-on-1 is, it's better to have a no than nothing, because that allows you to move on. What helps you, if you're not by yourself, is to, in a good or a bad way, is to get acorns or feedback from your founders. How do they believe that? And that can either help or they can prolong it. So from our end, I cannot tell you if it prolonged it or not, but we did a micro pivot because I think all of us weren't really confident yet to completely abandon this before we then really took a serious step and moved on into something else. But I think in that aspect, if you're not a serial entrepreneur, I think if David, he probably has seen much more, and he would be also with his VC and would be able maybe to see those aspects early. But if you're a first-time entrepreneur, it certainly helps that you have good mentors, probably if you have already some kind of friends and family around or some co-founders who can help you with that to really, I would say, tell you to take a step back, because you might be already too deep into the rabbit hole that you really take those signs and you feel like, well, I can just push it a little bit harder and then I'm going to see that great success. Most likely not going to happen. But I don't want to really say that, but I think that's what I could tell you. That's what helped us. We were always in that thing very tight-knitted.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause.